with a spiritual thing. You see, they're confusing the physical gender, you understand, the lower chakras with the upper chakras. Another way of saying this. 40 verses that Jonathan and David, one of them say, and it came to pass in 1 Samuel 18:1, it came to pass when he had made an end of speaking to Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. Notice what's saying. The soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. And when thinking about doing a short video on the subject matter, because brethren, one had asked about the Jonathan and David, were they gay? And working on some of the other projects, we didn't get time to work on that. But we thought about it, and so that the adversary would not have occasion to say, look, see, he didn't answer that, therefore it must mean that they are gay. These religious people, they don't want to deal with rah, 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 rah. You understand? And then it's an important point because of what's happening in society for us to really understand what the Bible really is saying, so we can overcome these other issues that Satan has thrown down into our nature because of the disobedience of the black man, Adam. So here it's saying the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. Did you ever see that pictures from ancient Egypt of the two brothers working together to tie that knot? They're working to tie that knot together. These two brothers who we hear were enemies. You understand? Some say it was Horus and Seth, you know, and Shet, Harui and Shet, which are working together. They're working in unison and coordination. The idea that that symbol, that symbology from ancient Kemet links up with, explains this Hebraic black idiom where it says that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. Their soul, they were soul mates, not in the gay marriage, homosexual nowadays, and of Babylon, Gentile, and of the Gentile world dominion. We want to marry each other as gay people and get civil marriages, which is a political thing. If people want to do those things, this is Babylon. Let them do in Babylon, like, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. So they're doing Caesar's thing, while we're seeking to give unto God the glory. And by saying that Jonathan and David were homosexual on some flimsy, misinterpreted, desperate homosexual people, I don't really call them gay because gay means happy. Were they gay? Were they happy? Probably they were happy. Were they homosexual as catamites, sodomites, temple prostitutes, you understand, hermaphrodites, or some other kind of situation that took place in a lot of these cultic religions and everything over there? No, they were not. You understand? And it says, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Now, what's interesting about this is that among a lot of the homosexual relationships that have been broadcast on us in the media and other places, and we hear about here and there, and they try to sell us on, and from the real life stories that we probably have seen or heard about and so forth and so on, become familiar with, most homosexuals, so-called gay people or homosexuals, it seems to be, among many of them, the male homosexuals. Let's specify this, because the female, black females, is something, I won't say unique, like it's special, like it's cool, like it's great, but we have to deal with that in its own unique context. But among the black male homosexuals, it's not really two men's hearts are knit together in some metaphysical sort of love. You understand what I'm saying? It's more or less one want to be on top and one be on bottom, and there's another dynamic going on. Frances Cress Welsing really dealt with it well in her ISIS papers, in order to really understand that these men, Jonathan and David, being black Hebrews, Ethiopian Hebrews, were not homosexual, based on the text of the Bible. To infer that, for example, let's look at verse 3. Verse 3 says, then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. Right? Because he loved him as his own soul. Hold on, I'm just doing the highlight here, but let me try to go into the verse, because verse 2 is missing, and the Spirit says, go into verse 2, and Saul took him that day and would let him go no more to his father's house. And Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him and gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword, and to his bow, and to his girdle. Now they say this is one of the places where they say in 1 Samuel 18, where this means that they were homosexual, because they stripped it. They usually would, when they quote it in some of the homosexual books, the homosexual agenda books, they would dot it after he stripped himself. Like, you can imagine what happened next. After he stripped himself of his robe that was upon him, he gave it to David. Oh, they'll stop right there to infer he gave it to him. You understand? In the modernist way. But, and his garments. Now, if you understand African culture, right? This is what's done in African culture. If you love your brethren, you will get as warriors. See, I'm talking about soldiers. A lot of men don't really understand this, because what they're looking at, well, what would they do here? I wouldn't strip my clothing down and give it to my homie. But your clothing is just common clothing. Here he's speaking about a robe, a royal robe. Here he's speaking about his garments, his sword, his bow, his girdle. Why? Because now Saul brought David to his house, because Saul's son Jonathan saw this young Israelite and said, he's an upright, honest man, Papa. You need a man like this around to help maintain your kingdom. And so once Saul took him to his house and said, yes, I want you around as one of the young warriors. You understand what Tedros did with Menelik and Johannes? Somebody could come along and say, oh, Tedros was gay because he kidnapped and kept Menelik and Johannes up in the mountain fortress and so forth and so on. That would be a totally wrong and a misinterpretation of it. He was grooming them for kingship, princeship, and kingship and rulership by being in the king's house. This goes all the way back to ancient times, ancient Egypt. You understand? So we have it in Ethiopia, we have it in ancient Egypt, we have it in ancient Israel, and this is what we're talking about here. So what is being confused is the custom of the East. Yeah, what's being confused? Can you call? Or you? Oh. Yeah, what's being confused is the custom of the East. Because then it goes on, and David went out whithersoever Saul sent him. And David behaved himself wisely in verse 5. And Saul set him over the men of war. Set him over the men of war. And he was accepted in the sight of all the people. And also in the sight of Saul's servants. Now, do you think that if Jonathan and David, according to this, had some homosexual encounter right here, understanding old Israel now, you know, where people will cut off your head in a heartbeat. You have to understand that. You see what I'm saying? Life and death, it was like a very vibrant African, Middle Eastern environment. You know what I mean? Over there. There wasn't all these PC laws and everything like that. And they were people who were simple on a primitive, a basic level. When I say primitive, on those prime 10 Commandments and other things like that. And something like that would have been considered an abomination, a real abomination, especially for two soldiers to now be having a homosexual activity, which obviously, if you read the text, it was in front of Saul. There was other people there. What you think, he didn't have anything else on? Like somebody wore a robe and didn't have any loincloth or nothing on? Or that soldiers who are in battle, who have to be on missions, eating, sleeping, living together, is going to be ashamed to strip down to his loincloths and give another soldier or another young man who's coming into the guard, into the service of the kingdom, to give him his clothes? They're going to have a homosexual encounter right there? And if they had a homosexual encounter, this is the language that the scripture is going to use to describe such? I mean, these people who say these things, homosexuals, the rest of them, listen, there's a lot of other issues that they can use, or other things they can use to, I won't say justify it, because many people have been abused, and, you know, many of them have been abused as children. Honestly, we understand that the Greeks like to have sex with little boys, and the Romans, and a lot of white upper class folks still do to this very day, and it takes place in a lot of European Anglo culture. Very sick. Now black people are beginning to learn and adopt all these kind of things too, so now white people can say, look, black folks doing the same thing, so what's the difference? There was a difference, and the time that we're looking at here in the Bible was a different time than today. So simply put, Jonathan and David were not homosexual. The gay